Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. It is a pleasure to be here today in Syracuse and Onondaga County with my colleagues in government, law enforcement, and advocacy. I am proud and always pleased to be joined by Mayor Stephanie Miner, my good friend Senator Dave Valesky, Police Chief Frank Fowler, Deputy Chief Stu Cavuto, Assemblyman Al Sturpey, Assemblyman Sam Roberts. I think we have a representative for Assemblyman Magnarelli with us, and also some terrific advocates. Patrick Stanzik from the Greater Syracuse Land Bank, one of the great success stories, I think, in our state, in my view. Rich Pachowski, the Executive Director of Syracuse United Neighbors, Kerry Quaglia, who's the Director of Home Headquarters, and Dwight Hicks, the Secretary of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank. We are also joined by Brian Tobin, the Mayor of Cortland, and by my Executive Deputy Attorney General, Marty Mack, the former Mayor of Cortland. So it's good to be in family. I appreciate everyone being here today, and I think that the fact that a group this large and this important has showed up for this press conference tells you something about why redevelopment efforts in Syracuse are really models in many cases for the rest of the state of New York. Specifically, we're here today as a part of our ongoing effort to revive, rebuild, and revitalize Syracuse and cities and towns across New York. If there's one accomplishment I'm proud of from my first term of Attorney General, it's my work to hold accountable the big financial firms that caused the crash of our housing market in 2008, and my work to ensure that part of that accountability included helping communities devastated by the crash to recover and grow. When I was first elected Attorney General, we were in the midst of the worst financial crisis in nearly a century. Banks were foreclosing on homes in record numbers, pushing families onto the streets and leaving thousands of properties, like the one we're standing in front of today, vacant or abandoned. I'm proud that my office led the nation in demanding justice from the banks whose reckless misconduct caused the crash of the housing market, and I'm proud of the fact that I was the first AG to hold out for a thorough investigation. The results of the work that the task force I now co-chair has done on this investigation have yielded well over $60 billion in relief nationally for state and local governments and to help homeowners and communities hurt by the crash. We've used a portion of these settlement funds to create the Homeowner Protection Program, or HOP, a statewide network of more than 90 legal services and housing counseling agencies, which have been helping New Yorkers facing foreclosure to stay in their homes and to help people understand programs they were eligible for that might enable them to purchase a new home. In just 2 years, our HOP network has seen over 40,000 New York families, including more than 3,000 in this area alone. And we have partnered with organizations like Home Headquarters, Metro Interfaith, United Neighborhood Housing Services, and Legal Services of Central New York in the HOP effort. But as we work to keep families in their homes, we quickly realized that even if you kept your home during the Great Recession, if you were on a street with 2 or 3 abandoned properties, you were still a victim of the crash. Your whole community was also damaged by the collapse of the housing market. So we went back and got the banks to commit $33 million to fund land banks, nonprofit corporations that buy up vacant properties and either fix them up or tear them down so the land can be put to productive use, including serving as affordable housing. And here in Onondaga County, I would say the Syracuse Land Bank is a great success story. A tribute to the mayor, senator, all of our colleagues, the assembly members in local government here who have worked together to make this a success. The Greater Syracuse Land Bank has taken $5 million in renovated properties that have already generated, I believe, over $7.6 million in tax revenues, demolished dozens of other properties, and sold more than 100 tax delinquent homes to new owners. This is smart and efficient public policy, but after we started funding land banks, we became aware of another problem, and that's the problem we're here to address today. New York has the longest foreclosure process in the country, and during the long foreclosure process, many properties entered what we call a zombie state. Zombies are properties that homeowners have abandoned where banks have not completed the foreclosure process and therefore not taken title to the property. The bank doesn't own them yet, so nobody maintains them. They fall into disrepair and become havens for crime, decay, vandalism, and arson. Zombies weigh very heavily on our local governments. They shrink the tax base, they decrease the property value of neighboring homes, and they're an enormous burden for code enforcement and emergency service providers. The issue is especially bad here in Onondaga County, which had the third highest percentage in the state of New York of residential foreclosures that were zombie properties last year. The solution to the zombie invasion requires legislation. My daughter loves it when I talk about zombies. But it is a much more serious problem than the one you see on television. Zombie houses are a serious problem, but they're a problem with a solution. So we're proud to stand here today as a group and reflecting the united will of the public officials and activists here in Syracuse and Onondaga County in support of a bill that will solve this problem. We're here to support the Abandoned Property and Neighborhood Relief Act, a bill which will force banks and other lenders to take responsibility to maintain zombies and help our local governments to regulate them. First, the bill would require banks to provide homeowners with early notice that they are legally entitled to remain in their homes until ordered to leave by a court. The reason we have so many zombies is a lot of homeowners fall behind on their payments and think they have to get out. They abandon the property before there is a court order that requires them to leave. Families don't understand their rights. This legislation will make sure they do. Second, the bill is going to make lenders responsible for maintaining a delinquent property after it's abandoned and not, as under current law, once the long foreclosure process is complete. Right now, the banks know they're going to take over the property. There's no one there. There's no one fighting the foreclosure. But we still have this huge time lag that results in the phenomenon of abandoned zombie properties. And then third, the bill is going to create a statewide registry for zombies that will be electronically accessible by and serve as a resource for local governments facing abandoned property issues. Banks that fail to maintain or register abandoned properties will be subject to fines. And I'm proud to announce today that the Abandoned Property Neighborhood Relief Act, which has been introduced with sponsors in both the Senate and the Assembly, has two new provisions that were added to the initial version of the bill we drafted last year. First, the bill would create an expedited foreclosure process for properties that are confirmed to be vacant. That'll speed up the time it takes for a bank to actually take ownership and to be able to put a property back on the market. Second, any penalties collected as a result of enforcement actions brought by my office for banks that don't maintain or list properties on the zombie registry will be directed to a fund for local governments to hire additional code enforcement officers for the municipalities where the violations occur. Ladies and gentlemen, this legislation is a no-brainer. It's supported by mayors, by county executives, by senators, assembly members, local legislatures, county boards, and law enforcement agencies all across the state of New York. Zombies put a burden on local government not just to maintain but also to police. They are a serious problem to public safety. They are a haven for firebugs, and it's something that really is a burden and an unnecessary burden on communities like Syracuse. We're looking to fix that by passing the Abandoned Property Neighborhood Relief Act this legislative session. So we seek now to pass this bill to put an end to the burdens placed on our law enforcement officers and other first responders. Let's put an end to the burden placed on our cities and towns by having to maintain these dilapidated properties. Let's put an end to the burden on taxpayers who have to pay extra because these properties remain abandoned for so long. And let's do it this year. I'm very pleased with the fact that we get to do this announcement here in Syracuse, which has just been, as I said, a tremendous success story as it's worked with our HOP network and worked to have a tremendously successful land bank. And I'm proud to now introduce the quarterback of that effort, Mayor Stephanie Miner.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Good. I want to thank the Attorney General for his continued support and partnership in all of the issues that we deal with here in the city of Syracuse, but particularly the issue of revitalizing our housing stock. Without the efforts of his office to address the underlying causes of the housing crisis and the financial crisis, we wouldn't have been able to access some of the resources, and being able to get those resources that his office made available to help us partner with the land bank to really begin to address in a systematic way for the people of the city of Syracuse the issue of having abandoned properties in our neighborhood. And as the Attorney General said, when we started unpacking these issues, we saw that we had a real problem with zombie properties. We stand in front of a zombie property and you can look to the left and look to the right and see that you have people living in houses who are taking care of their properties, and yet they are forced to live every single day next to these properties which have been abandoned by the banks which have responsibilities for them. As the administration for the city, we have contacted banks over and over again asking them to let us put people in those homes. Not just here, but across the city. And over again, they have said no. And what happens is a continual deterioration of the neighborhood. Families who want to move into these houses and take care of these properties are not allowed to. Our neighborhoods suffer and our taxpayers suffer. And I want to thank the Attorney General for recognizing this issue to help us solve this problem. Because unless there is a systematic solution where banks are held accountable, unfortunately, we cannot get to these properties in time to help revitalize our neighborhoods. So I want to thank the Attorney General for once again bringing this issue to the fore. Thank him for his partnership with us on the land bank and on zombie properties. And also I want to thank our partners from the Assembly and Senate who are here to join in support of this incredibly important issue to what is the foundation of any great city, which is our neighborhoods and our housing stock. So with that, let me turn the mic over to Senator Valesky.
Thank you, Mayor Miner. Thank you. Appreciate the chance to be here with my partners in government. This is, as the Attorney General and the Mayor have indicated, a critically important issue, and it really, in very many ways, is the next step, the follow-up to the land bank legislation that I had an opportunity to author in the Senate just a couple of years ago, and that has been a tremendous success. This is now, as the Attorney General has indicated, a legislative issue. But the reality is, the way Albany works, the Attorney General has an opportunity to introduce program bills in the legislature. This is an Attorney General program bill. Let me make that very clear. The Abandoned Property Neighborhood Relief Act has been drafted by the Attorney General and his staff. He has done a tremendous amount of work in both the Senate and the Assembly to bring it to us, because the next step is we have to make that change in statute. And I know that my legislative colleagues here, Assemblyman Roberts and Sturpey, understand how important this is and are anxious to bring this to a successful conclusion in the Senate. I'm pleased that the leader of my conference, the Independent Democratic Conference, Senator Jeff Klein, is the lead sponsor of the bill in the Senate. And the reality is, as you all know, we recently completed the New York State budget process, but we return to Albany next week for the 2.5-month remainder, non-budget session remainder of the legislative process this year. And there are many issues, and you've talked about and written about many of them, that have expiration dates in June, and issues that were considered but perhaps not brought to conclusion in the budget process itself. This is an issue, this legislation, in my opinion, deserves to be considered in conversation with all of those other issues out there, as far as issues that needs to be concluded prior to the June finish of the legislative session. So I appreciate the fact that the Attorney General will come to Syracuse and talk about this critically important bill, and look forward to continuing to work with him and my colleagues in the Assembly to make it a legislative reality this session. With that, I call Syracuse Police Chief Frank Fowler forward. These zombie properties, as all of you know, have very real impacts in terms of crime in our communities all across the state, and Police Chief Fowler will share his thoughts in that regard. Chief?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the Attorney General for his continual support to the Syracuse community and law enforcement, and all of his efforts in that regard. Properties like this, indeed, is a burden on public safety. This year, we've responded to multiple calls for school-age children during school hours trespassing on these properties. both male and females entering these properties where our police officers have to respond and have them removed. In addition to that, these properties become an attraction for the criminal element. We received calls from our neighbors on the west side of the city about people trespassing on abandoned properties. One of these properties, we arrived, conducted a search inside the house, the abandoned house, and we discovered a fully loaded shotgun and drug paraphernalia. Clearly, the criminal element was using this as a safe haven to sell drugs from and to arm themselves while they were conducting their criminal activity. Just yesterday, in the 800 block of Butternut Street, one of our officers were on patrol. They happened to notice a person trespassing on one of these types of property. They got out of their vehicle and engaged the 23-year-old suspect, and they discovered during their encounter with him that not only was he trespassing on the property, but he was in possession of a fully loaded 9mm stolen handgun in his waistband. These types of properties and people trespassing on these properties are responsible for numerous calls for police services. And if we can get these buildings occupied, then our neighborhoods will become a lot safer than what they are now. So I think this is a great legislation here, and I think it's going to help us out tremendously. And to further talk about the public safety aspect of this, I introduce you to Deputy Chief of Fire Stu Cavuto.
All right, Chief. Thank you, Chief Fowler. I'd like to thank the Attorney General and Mayor Miner for allowing me to be here and for this program. Abandoned buildings that aren't maintained soon become derelict buildings, and derelict buildings soon become attractive nuisances to curious children and nefarious individuals. Those buildings put young people, people that are less fortunate, and my firefighters at risk, and it's a danger to the community. I appreciate your efforts, Attorney General, Mayor Miner, and thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Attorney General.
Thank you very much. And once again, in closing, I really do have to repeat that there really is no place in New York State where the public officials and the activists and the professionals in law enforcement put differences aside and pull together more effectively than they do here in Syracuse, here in the Greater Syracuse area. You all are a model for the state, and I know that everyone's competing for resources, but I certainly can tell any of my colleagues in government who want to know, when you provide resources here, you make good use of them, you get results, and this has been a great community effort.